All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about what Jaron Ennis's camp had to say about Conor Benn, who tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs ahead of the fight that he had with Chris Eubank, and is pretty much saying exactly what I think needs to take place. And I think it's also very interesting seeing as these two guys are people that a lot of people were saying should fight each other, and honestly wondering who was going to win. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. And in this video, we're going to talk about steroids and boxing, and specifically what has been said out of the camp of Geron Innis through his trainer and father, Geron Innis, about what transpired with Conor Benn in this fight that he was supposed to have this weekend with Chris Eubank. And I gotta tell you, man, I agree with them 100%. Now, before I get into that, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you're a longtime subscriber and supporter, thank you so much for continuing to support the channel. Really does mean a lot. If you are new to the channel, please hit that like button, or excuse me, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. All right, so let's get into this. Conor Benn is an up-and-coming 147-pound fighter out of the UK, the son of Nigel Benn, who was a champion in the mid to late 1980s, had, famous rivalry with Chris Eubank. He and his son, Conor Benn, who was Nigel Benn's son, was set to fight Chris Eubank's son, Chris Eubank Jr., in a fight at a catchweight, right? Now, I had been trying to avoid conversations about Conor Benn for a while, because people are like, what do you think about Conor Benn? What do you think about Conor Benn? Conor Benn. And I was saying the whole time that, look, I will believe Conor Benn when I see Conor Benn leave the UK and fight in the United States or fight one of these top level welterweights. Until then, I'm not going to believe him. I also had said several times that I was like, there's just something really funny with that dude, especially when people were asking me about the outcome of the fight with Chris Eubank and people were like, well, who do you think is going to win the fight? And my take is, I don't know who's going to win the fight, but I got to lean towards Conor Benn, because I think something's going to be really funny going on in that fight. And that's exactly what happens. It winds up being that Conor Benn's camp, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, tried to pull a double whammy on Chris Eubank, and have Chris Eubank come all the way down from 160 to whatever the weight class was. He's originally a 168 pounder. Fought against Billy Joe Saunders at 100. I do believe fought against Billy Joe Saunders at 160 or 168. But I knew he's fighting at 168. He came down and he fought at 160. So now he would come down another weight class to fight Conor Benn. And then Conor Benn pops dirty for a woman's fertility drug, which is used to raise the natural level of testosterone after you're after you're cycling off of performance-enhancing drugs. So the trainer and father of Jaron Ennis said that it was up to him. Fighters like Conor Benn would be banned for life. Now, again, this is somebody that people were talking about could wind up one day fighting Jaron Ennis. Now, I don't care what type of drugs Conor Benn is on. As long as he ain't bringing a shotgun into the ring, he's not going to beat Jaron Ennis. But without a doubt, the unfair advantage that he has, people need to go back and look at the other fights that this guy had and think about, like Chris Van Heerden, the knockout he had on Chris Van Heerden, the knockout that he got against Chris Algieri, and just like the amount of force that he had with those big knockouts that he had, and be like, okay, no wonder this guy is able to have, punching power like that, because this dude is juicing. And to say that he should not be, like, first of all, these guys were actually talking about continuing to have the fight, right? All the way up to this morning where, Eddie Hearn is saying, well, just because, first of all, he tested positive by under VADA, and VADA is not official testing for the, in the UK. So, there's no reason for him to, not have this fight go over. And then he actually pulled up the example of Dillian Whyte and said how, Dillian Whyte, how people had been talking bad about Dillian Whyte because Dillian Whyte actually got, held up from having a fight when he wound up being completely innocent, which is not the truth. Dillian Whyte, number one, when he tested positive, was allowed to fight. That was against Oscar Rivas. When he was trying to fight Alexander Povetkin, that's when they were in his next fight. I do believe it was Alexander Povetkin. They were saying that he didn't, that they wound up just kind of dropping the review and letting him fight. I believe that was Alexander Povetkin that he was fighting in that next fight. Please excuse me if I'm wrong, right? So those guys over there, UK, do not have a good track record at all of punishing these guys for the use of performance-enhancing drugs, and neither really do people in the United States. I agree 100% with what Bozy Ennis is saying, that you need to strip these guys for life, because if you don't, you need to suspend these guys for life, because if you don't, it's never going to curb the use of the performance-enhancing drugs, because these guys are making millions of dollars by getting unfair advantages over people by using performance-enhancing drugs. Tyson Fury basically said the same thing several years ago when he said, look, he thinks everybody in professional boxing is on performance-enhancing drugs. And he himself, after he said that, tested positive for nandrolone. What happens to Tyson Fury? He winds up sitting out for 2 years, getting a retroactive suspension. They didn't even take the win off of his record and call it a no contest against Christian Hammer. So Christian Hammer still stuck with the loss. Tyson Fury still went on to fight, was allowed to fight Vladimir Klitschko, even though he had already had a positive test. So, I'm 100% with what Bozy Ennis says. Man, let these dudes, if these guys test positive, man, that should just be it for those guys. But they're not going to do it because obviously you've got guys like Canelo Alvarez who tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. But here's the thing. If you throw one of those dudes out and you actually make a big example of one of those real big guys and throw them out for the rest of their career, they're not going to do that. They're going to either stay down in a lower weight. They may not take difficult fights, but you don't wind up still having fighters getting put in, at risk and serious harm with their lives. And the idea that all the way up until this morning, that there were talks about still trying to allow Conor Benn to fight Chris Eubank, to me is just ridiculous. So my hat goes off to Geron Innis's camp. He, of course, said that they are going to insist on, as stringent a test as they possibly can get on anybody in order to, before they get in the ring with them. But that would just be a shame if you have a guy that is as talented and as skilled as Jaron Ennis that gets in there with somebody that is a blatant cheater, and he has to actually compete against somebody like that instead of being able to compete fairly and catch a loss to somebody like that. Man, it's ridiculous. That's why, Canelo Alvarez, to me, people always talk about his resume, but I ain't taking, in my mind, that performance-enhancing drug test that he had against Gennady Golovkin, that is part of his resume too, and will forever be. And it's just a big, big shame that boxing is not more serious and doesn't punish that much more seriously. It's not football. It's not basketball. It's not golf, right? If somebody tests positive, they're not really out there literally hitting you in your head, dozens and dozens and dozens of times throughout a fight. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.